And I sort of said it's a little bit like, when you're cooking a meal for a child, even though I didn't have children, or I still don't. But, it's about like hiding the vegetables in the meal. That, you're trying to get the good stuff into them, but you're covering it with them, with the secret sauce or whatever. The first story I did was the Chris Cairns court case. The Rugby World Cup was on. But what happened was all the bombings and the terror attack started. So it was Bataclan in France was the first one. And, the more I did it, the easier it got. But at the time, she said to me, well, do you want to be uncomfortable for a short period of time or for the rest of your life?
All right, so thanks, Emma. I really appreciate you doing this. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
When I was thinking about doing this, I was trying to think of how to introduce you and, how it's relevant to the audience in the newsletter and on the podcast. And I kind of got back to thinking about when I was trying to recruit you for 2020. And I remember saying to my boss at the time, people just talk to her. People just tell her their stories. And then she tells her stories. It's just really weird. People just talk to her. So that's kind of how I kind of view what you do and who you are as a storyteller. Now, that might mean me putting, words into your mouth. How would you describe it?
Oh, you've never said that to me before. What a lovely thing to say. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that is what a storyteller is. That you ask questions and hope that people feel comfortable enough to tell you. But yeah, I think all through my life, somebody was asking me about storytelling the other day, and I've been putting together a workshop about storytelling to help some clients that I've been working with, because it's weird that we have all these stories read to us as children, and then when you become an adult in the adult world and you're working in business, and you say to somebody, "Well, what makes a great story?" and they go, "Oh, I don't know." And so you're helping them sort of talk about, well, isn't it a great opening, something that's really interesting? And then you've got highs and lows and scary bits and happy bits and all that sort of thing. And then hopefully you get to an ending where, I don't know, it's either informative or entertaining, or it's, a happy ending kind of thing. So yeah, I guess that's what I'm always attempting to do with all through my career is to make really great stories that keep people engaged and maybe they learn something at the end. I think when we had our chat, when you were interviewing me for the role at 2020, and I think there was some sort of question about information and putting information in there in the stories. And I sort of said it's a little bit like, when you're cooking a meal for a child, even though I didn't have children, or I still don't. But, it's about like hiding the vegetables in the meal. That, you're trying to get the good stuff into them, but you're covering it with them, with the secret sauce or whatever. And I think that's also quite key. I'm always attempting to put something in there, those little Easter eggs of information that maybe people go on a wonderful journey in a whirlwind, and they get to the end of it and they go, wow, I really enjoyed that. And then they're like, oh, wow, I actually learned something along the way. So that's how I sort of look at the way I tell stories or help people tell their stories too.
Um, one of the things that we talk about in the newsletter and on the podcast and things like that is the journey, and then the reinvention, and often how the reinvention is actually a reversioning. So before we kind of get to that, just give us like the little origin story. How did you end up being a journalist and go from there?
I am actually a wannabe actress. That I did speech and drama as a kid, which I loved. I loved being on stage and I loved performing. And then but I didn't have the confidence. I mean, I come from a theatrical background. My mother was a dancer on the stage in the West End in England. My dad went over, and he was also on the stage as a singer. He even got a stunt role in a James Bond movie, because it was the 60s, and you just walked up and they said, have you done stunts before? And he's like, yeah. And they were like, great, and you come. And so I grew up with those amazing stories of the West End and theatre and dance, and lots of singing in my family as well. And I was like, this is what I want to do, and I want to go to London, and I want to do that. And so I did the speech and drama, gave the dancing a go, which was a bit of a disaster. My poor mother, who said, speech and drama would be good for you. And I was like, oh, okay, great idea. And so I did that all through my teens. And then it was like, well, what shall I do next? And I just thought, I'm not good enough to be an actress, and you had to go to Wellington and, be in the theatre down there. And I just sort of thought, oh, I don't think I'm good enough. And weirdly, it was that whole thing of, I said to my mum, well, I'm not good looking enough to be a lead actress. And then she's like, well, but there's loads of roles that you can do. But I was so fixated on, I'm not good looking enough to be a lead. So therefore I can't, that weird childhood brain of mine. I'm not good looking enough to be a lead. So therefore I can't be an actress, which is, so sad at the time. And I think if my mother had realized, she would have tried to help me along a bit and go, no, the character parts, you want to make people laugh, all that sort of thing. And so then it was like, well, English is my thing. What else can I do? And weirdly, I was playing golf for New Zealand at the time as a junior. So that distracted me for a while. And then it was like, okay, I've had enough of golf. What can I do? And that's when I thought, oh, maybe journalism. And I heard about AUT and the communications degree. And I thought, wow, I can learn all sorts of little bits and pieces. I was actually working part-time in radio at the time, paneling on shows like Love Songs to Midnight with Pete Sinclair, which was hilarious. And then, getting just roles on paneling for ZB and classic hits and all those sorts of things. And then at the end of it, I was like, well, I'm going to major um, as a journo, because I'm already working in radio, and then I'll be able to write. And so that's how I sort of started. And then I got a role on Radio Sport, producing the shows for the guys on Radio Sport. And that was the very, very beginning in the early days. Ended up on the show with Martin Devlin, which people still talk about, which makes me laugh. And actually, one guy rang up one day because I was on air with Martin, and he goes, "Weren't you on Love Songs to Midnight?" I was like, "Oh God, that show chases me." So that's how I got into journalism, and I started out in radio, and then went overseas, came back, and then got into TV3 sport, and then just progressed from there. Campbell Live, across to 2020. Then sadly, 2020 was no longer with us, so then went to, what was it after that, 7 Sharp, and then eventually across to England with the Europe correspondent job.
Just out of curiosity, do you have a sense that people do just talk to you?
Uh, no, not really. I'm always interested. I guess I'm always interested in people. I ask a lot of questions, and I think people people like it when you show an interest in them. And I don't know, maybe, people have told me I have an energy, a nice energy, and I think, and I don't do that intentionally, but maybe my enthusiasm for people and enthusiasm for them and their stories, because every single person you meet has an amazing story. You just have to sort of dig away a little bit. But I've learnt so much from people that you might never expect to teach you a lesson have come out with this incredible story. So there's so many out there, and I think that's also why I'm really enjoying my transition. I know I'm jumping ahead, Al, but transition into writing now, because it's like, wow, look at all the weird and wonderful things I've done and experienced, and now I can put them into my own stories.
So I guess that leads us on to what I was talking about before, the whole reversioning, repositioning, or pivoting as we get
Mm.
older, and sometimes we kind of end up going back to kind of what we originally really, really liked. And so much of what's come before is almost accidental, and we then become deliberate and go to what we really wanted to do. If we're fortunate. I realize that's a luxury. So run us through a little bit through your big pivot.
I think it was after I was the correspondent for a couple of years in London, and I arrived at the end of 2015. The first story I did was the Chris Cairns court case. The Rugby World Cup was on. But what happened was all the bombings and the terror attacks started. So it was Bataclan in France was the first one. And, going over there to Paris, and I was like, I have, whoa, I have never experienced anything like this before. The world media was right there in Paris, trying to get stories up, and talk to people about things that were horrific, which, people hadn't really experienced before. So that was, I did that. There was a lot of attacks. It was unbelievably draining, and frightening and scary. And my father was like, "What the hell is going on? You're not meant to
Yeah.
be doing these stories." And I was like, "Well, Dad, I'm a Europe correspondent. This is what we do. But you're not meant to be in the war zone." "Dad, I'm not in a war zone. It's okay." But yeah, it was, I think it was, I'd always wanted to go to London. That was one of the reasons why I went for the role. I was also feeling a little bit itchy scratchy in the 7 Sharp role. I knew I wanted to go and do something else, and I just couldn't quite figure out what it was. And this little voice in my head said, "You should go to London." And I was like, how the hell am I going to get to London? Who in their 20s in the Kiwi community is going to want to flat with somebody in their 40s? Where was I going to live? How could I afford it? And then that's when I applied for the role and got the role. But yeah, it was two years of pretty relentless. You're working 24/7. You didn't really have a holiday. If you did have a holiday, if anything happened, you'd be dragged back. You weren't really allowed to go away. You always had to be on call. And I just sort of thought of at the end of it, I thought, I don't want to be a journalist anymore. I don't want to always focus on all the bad things that are happening in the world, because I sort of thought of myself as a pretty happy person and I always gravitated towards comedy. I always wanted to find the light with the dark. And I just thought, I think I've reached the end here. I need to go and find another job. But then I was like, what the hell am I going to do? And then it was sort of like, oh, could I get into production? And I mean, in the end, I ended up going back into journalism. But I think that was the start of, as you talk about that, what you really truly in the very beginning, what you wanted to do, it was like, it was back to the acting. I wanted to go back to telling the stories. I wanted to go back to comedy, but I couldn't quite figure out how the hell I was going to make a living out of it when
Yeah.
I've been a journalist for so long. And you also have a lot of people that especially in production and television, there's always snobbery, isn't there? And I think, if you're a journalist, people in television and film are like, you're a media journalist, you're a news journalist, you don't know how to tell stories. And it's like, yes, I do. But then, of course, you have to somehow figure out how to prove yourself. And I think too, it was also that, I was in my 40s and was like, oh God, it's not like I'm in my 20s and I can go and work in 10,000 different places for nothing. As I did actually have to feed myself and clothe myself. And I was living in London, one of the most expensive places in the world to live. So that was the beginning. It's like, I want to get out of journalism. I don't want to tell these stories anymore. And then I was working at a science and technology show, 2019, just got the job. And I sat down next to this woman, and we got on like a house on fire. And she'd been a journalist producing all her life. She's about 10 years younger than me. And she said to me, where would you rather be? What would you rather be doing? And I was like, wow, what an interesting chat. So we started to chat because she started talking about film and she wanted to make films. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I said, well, I've always had this idea I'd love to make this TV show about this and that. And I was telling her about it. And she's like, yeah, that sounds really cool. And then, of course, the following year, COVID hit. And I think so many people suddenly looked at life and what they were doing and went, maybe it doesn't have to be this way. Maybe I can try something different. And McKee's rang me up out of the blue. Well, no, it wasn't out of the blue. We were always talking. But she rang me up and she said, I've written 2 short films. Would you help me make them? And if we make these 2, then you have to write your short film, and I'll help you make that. And I was like, okay, that sounds easy. I mean, it's production. We're used to that. And
Yeah.
so away we went. But then it was, we made her 2 shorts. Then she's like, come on, you got to write your short film. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah. And I'd never written dialogue before. She had, and so that was great. But I remember sort of writing the first I think I was on draft, like maybe draft 4. And I was like, oh, this is pretty good. I think I'm liking this. There's some really nice moments in it. And so I sent it to McKee's and she's like, yep, come back to me after draft 10. And that she was really great because she kept throwing it back at me and she's like, would you really say this? Would a person really say this? And so that was really the beginning. And so we're sort of creative partners now. We went to Cannes in March and, we're developing a feature film script now. But that was sort of where it all began that first day at work when she's like, where would you rather be? What would you rather be doing? And we're quite different people. But we have, so many things in common. It's about friends. It's about family. It's about trust. It's about hard work. It's about hustle. It's about wanting to be more creative. And so, yeah, that's sort of what we're doing now as well. I mean, that's still the side hustle. We're still actually having to earn a living at the same time.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things in there that I think about. As one is the bravery, because these do take an element of bravery,
Mm.
and the other is the okay. Well, let's just start with the bravery. Or actually, no. What it was is the immediate concern that people of an age go, well, if I'm going to do this, how am I going to make a living out of it? And it's like, well, one, if you want to do it, do you have to make a living out of it straight away, or is it just worth doing because you want to do it? It's kind of that weird, like if you when you're younger, somebody says you want to do it, you do it. It's not because you have to
Yeah.
make a living out of it. It's kind of weird. So two things: one is the bravery to try something you haven't done before, and two, to push past the whole I have to make a living for it to be worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, I guess everybody is very different, but I think you're right. When you're in your 20s, you go, "Oh, yeah," and you just wait, grab a few mates and you go off and you shoot something or whatever. You write something that but I always look at myself, and I don't know where I came up with this sort of analogy, but I always think of as you get older, you're a bit like an onion, and there's the layers that keep folding up, folding up, folding up. And because you're always protecting yourself, or you're looking after people, or you're having to pay a mortgage, or all those concerns that as you get old, the baggage that you bring with yourself. And also, I think too, you tell yourself a story, don't you? Is that, well, I'm a this person, I'm not a that person,
Absolutely.
or I can't do this because I have this trait because somebody told me one day in my 20s that I was this, so therefore I am that. And so I think you sort of build this version of yourself up, and it's hard to pull the layers back, and remember that when you feel uncomfortable, it's like, okay, you're feeling uncomfortable because you're now breaking a habit. That's all it is. And I think you're creating awareness around how you react to things. And I'm constantly looking at how I do things now. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a habit of being a journalist for, 15, 20 years, and a news journalist, when you're moving really fast. And everything I do at breakneck speed. And people are often saying to me, we just need to slow down. Or people will
Take a
say,
beat.
gosh, you
Take a
do that.
beat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or they'll say, oh, you do that. Everything's so fast. And I'm just like, well, yeah. And then I go, oh, yeah, I'm not in the newsroom anymore.
Yeah.
But habits, and habits that the longer you have a habit, the harder it is to break it down. So I think we do have a lot of that in there. What I think if you're doing something and again, these are all the things that have popped into my head over the last 5 years, is that if without my keys there beside me, I wouldn't have had the confidence to do it. I
Sure.
don't think I would have been able to do it on my own. I needed her to keep giving me a kick, going, come on, hurry up. That, and also she talks about, humility and things like that. She said, you are the most humble presenter I have ever met. Stop it. Stop doing it. You need to be, I want more ego. She said, if we're going to move into the world of film and that sort of thing, you need to walk in a room and own that room, and not sort of say, oh yeah, this little thing I've done. It's like, this is the best thing. You guys will won't, you won't, until you read the script, you won't believe it. And I've had to sort of relearn things. I mean, yeah, I when I presented, I loved presenting, but it was more, I loved the telling people stories and talking to people. It wasn't, I needed to be on the air and I
Yeah.
needed to be front and center with the microphone. I just enjoyed telling the story. So, yeah, I've had to sort of, and again, it's not arrogance. It's just, feeling good about what you're doing. So, again, it's a lot of shifting of mindset. And it's a lot of peeling the layers of the onion back and getting out of your own way. But I remember when I went over to the UK, to be the correspondent, everybody said, "Oh, you're so brave." And I just sort of, at the time, I didn't think about it as bravery. I was like, well, it's my next step. It's a new job. And so at no point have I ever thought it's brave. And in many ways, it's, especially with the writing and getting into film and things, it's something I've had to do. And I think if you can really, lean into that, then, that it's something that you truly have to do, then hopefully that reduces the amount of over analyzing and overthinking you do. I mean, I'm terrible at that. You as a journal, you'd write a word, a sentence until you got it right, and then you'd move on to the next sentence because your stories were only ever 1 minute 30, 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30 long. Obviously, a bit different in dealing with the longer form storytelling. But of course, you don't really want to do that with if you're writing a script. You just want to let it flow and then go back again and do the draft and then go back again because you're slowly tweaking and things like that. So just all those habits. But yeah, I think the bravery is I never think about it as bravery. I just sort of think about, well, this is what I have to do, otherwise I'm going to go a bit insane.
I think you underplay the bravery piece there a little bit. I mean, I know you reasonably well, and I know some of the stuff been through and done and whatnot. So I think you're brave. The other piece is that it's that whole narrative psychology thing, it's that you are the stories that you tell yourself. And if you tell yourself a different story, you can be something else. That's kind of a cool thing, which is kind of what you're doing. Um, what about the whole flip from what you were doing to making movies? And I know it's not quite as basic as that. Um, what are the things that you've brought with you that have been helpful? Long
From
question,
one
sorry.
career to the other? From one,
Yeah.
yeah, from one career to another.
One
I
version of
think
you to
it's,
the new reversioned version of you.
the reversion. I actually think it's weird. I think it's allowing more of me to come through. As the journalist, it was always about everybody else, but about the writer, you want to feel more. You want to, be more a bigger part of your story. So I think the but I think also not to dismiss what you have done, because
Yep.
that's all, all that experience, all those experiences, all the people that you have met, they all bring something to the party. I mean, especially, if you're on a film set, these are short film sets. This is not a feature film set, but on our short film sets, it's that, my organizational skills, my ability to solve problems very quickly, the dealing with people, running around. Like, I mean, I was the so-called producer on the first two films, and I was the runner as well. I was getting the lunches. I was sorting that out as well. So I think, you always bring a skill set with you, and you don't even think about it because it just comes with. So I think that has been super helpful. Like, it has set me up. What I have had to learn, and I mentioned before, is just being able to speak about myself without feeling embarrassed, without feeling a New Zealander about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I don't do much, and I'm just a little New Zealander. And I've actually helped a few people in the UK who have come over, and they wanted help with their presenting and talking to clients and things like that. And I think one woman came to me, young woman came to me, and she was pretty much the sole person over in the UK from the New Zealand company, and she was fronting clients all the time. And I said, so tell me a bit about what you do and all that sort of thing. And I said, you know what? You don't need presenting help. You're a great presenter. It's obvious to me that you're a great communicator. What you need to let go of is that you don't belong in the UK and that you're from a little place in New Zealand, and so therefore you don't have anything to offer. That's what you need to let go of. I said, you are here and you have every reason to be here, and you've got something really interesting to say and to sell. And she just went, ah, yeah, okay, cool, thanks. And that was it. That was all. And I think I see that a lot with women. Any women that I've sort of
Sure.
helped with presenting and moderating and things like that. Same sort of thing. Women have this terrible habit of going, oh, I wouldn't be able to do that and that sort of thing. And I was like, well, hang on, look at all the things you've done, and then what you're speaking about is what you know about. So you've got,
Yeah.
every right and every reason. But the only reason I can say that to them is because I've experienced that myself. I have every right to be in the room. I don't know everything, but that's why you bring in all sorts of people like DOPs and other producers and, script editors and runners. And, you know, you make something as a team. I don't have to know everything myself.
It's weird, isn't it, that that whole imposter syndrome. I guess it's not that weird, but it
Mm,
actually gets worse as you get older,
mm.
because you kind of embed the story of who you're meant to be. Who everybody else thinks you are, and it kind of gets harder and harder to step away from that. Is that something? What do you do to help you with that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about the words imposter syndrome, and I actually just think it is. I just had to sort of say to myself that, you know, what if you didn't do it? You know, would it be worse if you didn't do it? And I remember, when I came out very late in life. I was in my late 30s, and I remember a friend, Rhina, who and she was amazing. And I remember talking to her, and she said, well, what would you prefer? Because I was like fearful of telling my parents. I was fearful of telling my friends. I was worried about, all that sort of stuff, which was ridiculous. And I didn't need to worry about it. But at the time, because I had been in the closet for such a long time, it was, I had to sort of bring it out from my very depths. It was literally like sort of pulling it out and actually sort of saying it to the world. And, the more I did it, the easier it got. But at the time, she said to me, well, do you want to be uncomfortable for a short period of time? or for the rest of your life. And when she put
Yeah.
it like that, I was like, oh, there's no choice. And so, it was always like, yes, I am totally uncomfortable saying this, but get it out there and, I feel relief. And I think that's sort of the imposter syndrome too. What would you prefer? That you never ever do this. And, you read books about people sort of talking about the regrets at the end of their lives. And it's always about the things that they didn't do rather than the things that they
Yeah.
did do. And I think more and more I'm just, I do have to take deep breaths, and I do have to, talk to my wife and my creative partner about things sometimes. And sometimes you just need somebody to give you a kick, and away you go. But I think it's also accepting that you will always make mistakes, because that is life. But it's also not the end of the world when you do. And you'll
Yeah.
learn from that. And, all these people, these women I talked to about presenting, I was like, so what if you stumble? So what if you say, I don't care. Just make sure you're telling me a great story, or make sure that you're telling me something that's exciting and that you're passionate about, and that'll come through, when you talk to me or talk to a crowd, or whatever. So I think that's is sort of, the imposter syndrome is just like, what would you prefer? Small amount of
Yeah.
uncomfortable or lots?
Yeah. One of the things I think as we get a bit older as well, we kind of tend to isolate. Our friend groups get smaller. We don't move in as a wider range of circles. So we're not exposed to as many things. And you talk about sorry, I should know this. I've forgotten her name, your creative partner, who
McKees,
kind
yep.
of gave you the nudge. Yeah. It's kind of like, how important do you think it is to have those people around you that do challenge you and help you move through these things?
Hugely. Yeah, you have to have those people. And I think there's a, some, I mean, I remember way back when I thought, oh, I need to find a producer, or I need to find somebody or other. And I started looking. But it is, I think once you open yourself up to an idea, that it is, if you open yourself up to something and think, oh, well, maybe I'd like to get into film, without even knowing it, you actually sort of start reading things online, or you start talking to people about it. And that is when those people sort of start appearing in your life. And it's not
Yeah.
like they, magically manifest, but you have to be open and
Yeah.
actually go, I'm gonna do this. And it doesn't mean you have to launch straight in, but it's a gentle sort of evolving. I think you start sort of talking about it, thinking about it more, listening to more podcasts, reading more books, and then suddenly you do start talking to people. And it's amazing how many people go, oh, you should talk to so-and-so, or, oh, you should talk to so-and-so. I mean, for me, it was magical because I sat next to her at work, and I never expected that to happen. But yeah, I think you just have to sort of, bring it into your life more. And then that's when the people do start appearing. But, you also have to knock on a lot of doors. And there's that whole sort of thing of not getting discouraged. Like,
Yeah.
McKee's always talked about, I think it was last year, when we started talking about maybe we could develop a feature film. And she said to me, we have to go into it, no shame. No shame. So, we knock on all the
Yeah.
doors, we ring all the people on the phone. And if people say no or reject us, we don't care. We keep going. And there has to be an element of that to it as well. Just keep not bugging people, but, if somebody doesn't answer your text, give it a week, and then, send another one, or try ringing them up. And, don't just send emails, try and get on the phone, try and get in front of them. I mean, I was running around at Cannes, and I just remember running around thinking, what am I doing here? I've
Yeah.
created a couple of short films. This is crazy. I had one guy, sales agent, and he's like, walk and talk. And I was like, oh my, oh, it's out of a movie. And I'm running down the road with him, with big long strides. And he's like, so tell me about your concept. And I was running along, chatting away to him. And I was like, what am I doing? But it was so exciting and thrilling. And at
Yeah.
the end of it, he said, okay, send me an email. And then, of course, I started going, hang on. Oh, did I say, oh, what did I do? Oh, what should I have done that? Should I have done that? It's like, oh, come on, Emma. You've never walked and talked before. That was so super exciting. You've learned a lot from it. We'll go again, and that's
Yeah.
sort of what you do.
I heard this. There's this expression around luck, or can you create luck? And it's you can increase your luck surface area. So the more you expose yourself to things, the more lucky you get. And it just
Mm,
makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Um,
yes.
do you want to tell us what you're up to now, and what you're looking ahead to?
Yeah, so well, to make money, I'm actually working for BBC Studios making branded content for clients, and I've never had to deal
Yep.
with clients before. I did that last year and this year, so that's actually been really great for me because, of course, when you're wheeling and dealing with people, in production and things like that, that's that is that client thing, and it's so funny because my wife, she's in corporate, and I write emails to clients sometimes, and I'm like, what do you think? Do you think this is? And she's like, don't write that. That's far too blunt. And so I'm really, so I'm learning these different ways of how to sort of get people to do things without saying, for goodness sake, hurry up. So there's that something, but so that's sort of to keep the money ticking over. But at the same time, I wrote a short film last year, a comedy, because this is what I really want to do. And I've decided, well, Mac and I were sort of thinking, what could we do with it? And it takes an awful lot of energy and money to make short films. And
Yep.
she's like, maybe you could develop it into a series because the world's going to hell in the handcart at the moment. Everybody's like, we need more comedies. And so that's what I'm working on at the moment
Cool.
is how can I turn my short into a pilot and then plot out. And I've never written a TV show before, so this is something that's new to me. So that's what I'm working on. Then we've also got this feature film in development, which is mainly being written by McKees, and then I sort of give feedback. But we're looking at should we go to Berlinale, and we went to Cannes. Can we do this? So who can we talk to? Talking to co-production people, that sort of thing. All those wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. And then, yeah, there's other little shorts. We're also working with BFI at the moment, which is the British Film Institute, working with a script developer. We've got a short. So again, we've applied for funding for different things, and through applying for funding for the feature film, we were going to make a short initially, but through that, they sort of said, "Oh, well, we didn't select you for funding, but we'd like to work with you. Would you like to do this?" So we're working with a
That's really
script
cool.
developer on that, which is really cool. And it's also sort of getting into the BFI and getting into the British film, because again, you need to be talking to these people. You want them to know you, because the more they know you, the more likely they are to invite you to different things. So
Your like surface area.
that's exactly. So that's what we're doing with them. And what I'm really excited in is they've also got workshops that they'll have, producer workshops and also director workshops, because, producing, despite the fact I don't really actually like producing, I prefer the creative side of things. If you're going to write and if you're going to be a director, you have to have an understanding of the business and how that
Yep.
side of things works. So there's so many people out there going, I'm a writer, I need a producer. Actually, what you should be doing is learning about the craft of producing, because you also want to hold on to your own IP. You're going to make more money that way, and you're going to have more creative control. So, you need to look at it is a creative industry, but you need to look at it like a business at the same time. So, yeah, I'm trying to learn a lot about the business. We've had meetings with, tax people and all sorts of things, just trying to understand how it all works, entertainment contracts, all that sort of thing. So, yeah, there's a lot going on, and just finding that time, that creative space where I can sit and write. Yeah.
So all pretty exciting stuff for a young lady who was playing golf in Northland all those years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, that was the other thing. I was like, oh, maybe I could make a sport movie. And then my wife was like, yeah,
No,
but not about golf. I was like, yeah, that
no.
maybe that's true.
There's no good sports movies, Emma. There's no good sports movies.
Yeah, well, I was looking at being at like Beckham the other day, and I thought I really
Oh,
love that
okay.
movie. It'd be so great to see another film like that. But yeah, this is the thing. I've got, Al, I always remember you walking around at work with your notebook, writing down things, and that's me now. I hear lines from something, and something happens, and I'm scribbling away for all these ideas that you're gonna feed into something. So yeah, it's exciting. It's nice to have the side hustle, as we call it, although the side hustle sucks up a huge amount of time. But
Yeah.
it is a lot of fun, and I do feel reinvigorated again. I was at the end of my time as a correspondent, 2017, I was getting a bit worn out and a bit over
Yeah.
it, and so this has really sort of inspired me again to go back to my roots, which is cool.
Just before we go, is there a way people can see Late to the Party?
There will be. I need
Okay.
to put it on
All right.
YouTube. I need to put it on YouTube.
Yeah,
Yes.
do that. It's a really cool
That
film. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's that whole sort of thing of it's 4 years old now, which is crazy,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Oh, I could have done that better. Oh, why don't we do that better?" And, it's that sort of thing. But
No
you've gotta
shame.
do something. Yeah, exactly. You've gotta start somewhere, and I'm proud of it because I got off my butt and did it. And, so many people that you talk to in the film thing, and they always sort of say, "But have you done anything?" And it's like, "Yeah, I have. I have
Yeah.
made a
Yeah.
short."
Yeah.
And that's the difference. If you can show that you've actually done it, don't sit there and wait. Like, show that
Yeah.
you've actually done something, then that's yeah, that's everything.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. I know, we talked about all the cool stuff and how exciting it's all been, but I know at times it's been pretty difficult. But I've really enjoyed watching how you're getting on. It's a shame you have to do it so far away. We don't get to see you. I always I look back pretty fondly on our times working together. So,
Yeah.
well done. And hope it really keeps going for you. It's really exciting.
Thanks so much, Al. Thanks for your support. I know, and I've got so many wonderful people back home that just little texts and emails now and again is amazing. And of course, I did the crowdfund for Late to the Party. So many of my friends and family sort of put money in to actually make that happen. So yeah, it's the Kiwi roots. They're very strong. I haven't lost my accent, as you can hear, and there's no shame in that Kiwi accent. It makes a big difference in the UK. But we really appreciate your support. Lovely to chat again.
All right. Cheers, Emma.
Bye.